Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Trend Detection Podcast. I'm really pleased to be joined by my colleague, Dan Reid.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Once again, actually, so you're one of our regular guests now, so it's really...
Third time.
Too
lucky. Many, maybe.
Third time lucky, I hope. But today we're talking about another enhancement to our maintenance co-pilot within the Senseye Predictive Maintenance platform, of course. So we're going to dive into that. That's Knowledge Builder. And yeah, we're going to go into that today. But I guess first of all, Dan, let's sort of zoom out, I guess, because we wanted to look at sort of the context to all this, why we've developed it. And we'll talk about the actual functionality. But if we just start with the big issue in industry today, I talked to a lot of people around knowledge loss in industrial maintenance and what impact that's had on operational efficiency.
Yeah, so it's certainly, we talk to customers a lot, and obviously a lot of what we talk around is predictive maintenance and downtime and related topics. But the other major topic which gets brought up is knowledge and capturing it and surfacing it. There's some quite interesting reports on this topic. So Deloitte published a report, and it said that 62% of manufacturers, their biggest issue is talent recruitment and retention. And that's their biggest issue. It's not one of their biggest, it's the biggest. So this is a problem that's very much front of mind for manufacturing and our customers in particular. And I think it stems from sort of two problems. The first is it's an aging workforce. So in that same Deloitte report, they identified that 25% of manufacturing employees are 55 or older. So that's a big portion of manufacturers, maintainers who are going to be heading towards retirement. And obviously through retirement, these organisations are losing the skills, the experience, all that knowledge from these experienced individuals. And then on the other side of this problem, over the last sort of 2 or 3 decades, there's been a declining interest in manufacturing, mechanical engineering, and all of the related topics. And it means that in the job market, you just don't have the people who have the skills to backfill these positions. So it does lead to quite a troublesome situation. And in terms of efficiency, what it means is that you're having people who are less skilled at maintenance or less experienced. The maintenance obviously takes longer, it's more prone to mistakes, and that will have a knock-on effect to uptime, mean time to repair, and just general efficiency of the assets and the sites.
And I guess because, even when I sort of started within the Senseye team, the talk was a lot about unplanned downtime. That used to be the focus, and it's still a very important metric, but what we're saying is this is sort of shifted, I guess, in the past maybe 1, 2, 3 years towards, this is becoming a real issue now.
Yes, yeah, very much so. So, downtime is still an issue, and making sure that you're doing precise maintenance is still an issue. But yeah, it's certainly how do you go about capturing all of the knowledge, especially as people are retiring. You want to capture it before they retire, and then making sure that knowledge is accessible and you get value from it. And it's a difficult problem, and something that over the last maybe 2 and a bit years, Senseye has been focused on, and we're seeing great benefit from that for our customers.
And I guess the maintenance co-pilot, to start with, has been a big step towards that. So maybe for people maybe not 100% aware, we could talk about sort of the development of that over the past year or so in general, and where we are today.
Yes, so this was, I think we released it probably a year ago at this point, and there's sort of multiple elements of it. First of all, within Senseye now, when we raise an alert to a user, so that we believe an asset needs attention or it needs maintenance, we obviously provide details of what we've seen in the data and graphs alongside it. But now you also have an interactive co-pilot you can talk to. And it's like any chatbot that you're used to, but within Senseye. And it has the context that it needs. So it understands the asset you're looking at, the case, what we've seen in the data, historic cases which are of relevance, recent work events, all of this information it has available to it. So you're able to ask questions about, what's the situation, what should I do next, and it can help guide the user. And this is coming back to this issue of having maintainers who may be less experienced. So we're trying to provide guidance to them. And just one more thing, I think the more interesting topic is, obviously it's nice having that interactive co-pilot to talk to, but it's even better if you don't have to talk to the co-pilot, right? So when we raise cases, not only do we present the information we've seen, we also then provide prescriptive guidance alongside it. That we suggest what are the potential root causes to this problem, so that the maintainers can look at the data, look at the potential root causes, and know what to do next.
No, absolutely. And what you talk about there, within the Senseye application, there's already a vast amount of data which the co-pilot can use to then provide that prescriptive guidance, whether in an interactive way or in the cases, which again, I think you raised on one of our previous, when we launched it, it was very important. You sort of told that story of there's a great summary here. So people like me, I could go in there and understand the stuff straight away, which I thought was really cool.
Well, that's
really
the hope.
Exactly, really cool functionality. But all that knowledge within the app is one thing, but and back, I guess, to our first question, and we talked about the knowledge that's actually being lost due to retirement. So there's knowledge within the app, but there's also all this other knowledge that's leaving the organisation. So what type of knowledge is sort of leaving with retirement and people changing industries, etc.? Yeah,
a lot, unfortunately. So I think this is, the individuals who are retiring have been in the industry for decades. They've built up loads of knowledge through that time. And especially that generation, actually people's tenure at their current employers are normally longer than what we might have in our generation. So you might be talking that they've actually had decades of experience in that factory, right? Working with them assets, working with the processes, and they know it inside out, really in depth, and you are losing all of that. And it's almost to the level where you get that intuition, when something is breaking, these individuals will know what the likely root cause will be. They will know how to fix it efficiently. They'll know how to stop it in future. So it's all of that knowledge that will be lost. And, it's often called sort of tribal knowledge within organizations. It's that internal knowledge which builds up over years, which is just, hard-earned, hands-on experience, which is very hard to capture and to replace.
Yeah, and I guess that point as well. So I guess it also restricts collaboration as well on that side of things. So it's actually a barrier to collaboration, because again, if people don't have the knowledge, then how are they supposed to share that across their organisation? But I guess there's other barriers too to collaboration that we could raise as well.
Yes, certainly. So it might be worth sort of talking through the types of knowledge we're dealing with. So on one side, you've got a certain type of knowledge which is documented, it's explicit, and these are things, generally you have sort of manuals for your assets. So say you buy a Siemens drive, you'll get a manual with that, and that will talk you through the maintenance you're supposed to be doing. It will have troubleshooting and all of this information, the components. So that's one form of very explicit knowledge within an organisation. But there's much more local knowledge as well, which is typically documented. So most organisations will have standard operating procedures, which are essentially like step-by-step guides. When X happens, you do ABC. And this is local to the organisation, normally local to a particular factory, sometimes even more local to like a line in some situations. But most manufacturers will have this information available. And I think the difficulty is more the accessibility of it. So say when you're trying to fix something, you're trying to do some maintenance, you're probably under time pressure, especially if it's like a reactive situation. Are people going to be able to find them documents in the first place? And even if they do find a document, some of these documents are hundreds of pages, right? They're very intense. So you actually have to find the information within the document which provides value. So this sort of accessibility of that knowledge is problematic. And then on the other sort of main type of knowledge is more that sort of tribal knowledge. So it's that inbuilt in a company knowledge that gets built up over time, experience. It's understanding actually these types of assets fail in these sort of ways, and actually, you have to tweak this and turn that to fix it. It's that sort of knowledge that gets built up. And this is just hard knowledge to document, right? It's hard to sit someone down and say, what are your intuitions? Write them down for me. It's just difficult. I think the closest manufacturers have are sort of maintenance systems. So these are databases where you log the work and maintenance which happens on an asset over time. So you do build up a history of what's happened to that asset. And that's incredibly useful. The issues with maintenance systems is, firstly, they're notorious for not being very high quality. So, sometimes records aren't captured, or actually the information captured isn't detailed enough to be of use. Now, that's not always all the time. I should comment, because actually a lot of our customers do keep good records. But also then you've got another accessibility problem, like you've got a mountain of records for the asset. You're under that time pressure. You want to get something fixed. It's hard to dig through that pile of records to find situations in the past which might give you some guidance. And in an ideal world, you wouldn't just be looking at that single asset history. You'd be looking at every asset which is similar in the site or in the whole organization, and picking out actually that incident 2 years ago in the site across America is very similar to what I'm having now. Maybe I can learn from that. So, accessibility is one of the key issues. And like any industry, there's silos between teams and plants, and for a lot of global companies, language barriers, there's shift work. People are busy. They're responsible for keeping the factory running, right, rather than writing down knowledge. So I don't know. It's a tricky problem.
And like I say, having the time to actually read through manuals and find the exact part they need. So what we're hearing here is there's all these pockets of knowledge, whether it's people, whether it's manuals. We could talk about a manual in a dusty cupboard somewhere, or a manual uploaded into a file sharing place. But there's just all this knowledge dotted around. What you want to do is bring it into one place together, which leads us to
perfect introduction
to Knowledge Builder, which we're introducing in Senseye Predictive Maintenance. And I guess let's just say, how does it work, Dan? I guess is a simple question.
Yes. So. Knowledge Builder is one of our sort of newest features related to knowledge. But obviously, like I said, we've been doing this for a couple of years now. So there's others which we can talk through in a bit. But Knowledge Builder is all around capturing that explicit documented knowledge into the system. So users are able to take their manuals, their procedures, upload it into Senseye. Senseye then processes that information and makes it available for us to use. And the way we use it is in two ways, and it relates to the Copilot we were discussing earlier. So when you're having an interactive discussion with the Copilot, you can ask questions about what you're doing or the maintenance you want to perform, and then the Copilot can refer to the documentation you've provided to provide the user guidance. But as I said before, it's nice to not have to ask for this information. So alongside that, we're also proactively looking at the documentation and identifying information which would be useful to bring into cases. So when we are providing that prescriptive guidance, we're now supplementing it with that explicit knowledge which is captured in that documentation. So the troubleshooting section of your manual, we're bringing that into cases, or the procedures that you're supposed to do in response to certain situations. We can bring that into the case as well. So we are solving that sort of accessibility problem by essentially serving up the information people need. And we're also trying to address that, the guidance side of things. So when people do need more guidance, we can actually give them that guidance up front, sourced from their own documentation.
And I guess the first question people would be interested to know is what types of results. I know we talked about manuals and different things, but are there sort of specific examples you could give which would provide the most value, to enhance the outputs?
Yeah, so you can upload pretty much any file. So text files, PDFs, Office-based documents, audio, video, and that's housed within Senseye for people to make use of. Now, right now, the Copilot can only make use of text and PDF files, but we're obviously going to broaden out support for other files in future. And what's important to understand is actually when we're processing these files, we use vision models. And what that means is if you're uploading documents which have a lot of flowcharts or diagrams or tables of information, we can consume that information and make it available. Many people might have scanned paper documents, and we can make use of that as well through these vision technologies. So, we can accept quite a broad range of documentation. And that obviously complements the knowledge we already have inside of Senseye. So, the typical way we work is we collect measurements from people's machines, and we obviously track that for a very long time. So we're sort of building up a history of that asset within Senseye. And then we complement that with integrations into maintenance systems. So we bring in information about what work has been performed on assets. And then we also collect our own information, so people can leave comments in Senseye, they can provide feedback on cases, we collect manual measurements. There's a whole load of information that we have, and that information is much closer to that more tribal knowledge. It's more that sort of history of an asset over time, what fails and what do we typically do with that asset. So I think Knowledge Builder is really interesting because we're taking what I would consider the more tribal, and then we're adding in the explicit documented, and that sort of combination of all of that in one place, being able to pull on that information as people need it and surface it when they need it. We're really tackling the core problems that lie at this sort of knowledge problem for customers.
Yeah, and I guess actually specifically, so we're combining all this knowledge. Makes a lot of sense, and it's continuously learning and improving from all these different sources of knowledge, which is fantastic. But the output of this is obviously prescriptive guide, like suggestions on what they should do, what should they investigate. How does it sort of fit in with that? How does it produce that output, I guess?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. So when we spot something in the data, so this might be abnormality that we've seen, a step or a spike or a sort of a trend. We'll raise that to a customer in a case. So the cases start off with describing what we've seen in the data. So we describe the actual measurements which have changed. And then we take them patterns we've seen. We'll look back in the asset's history, but not only the asset in question, it's any asset which is similar across the organization. So that might be across sites if you've got very good sort of uniformity of assets. And we'll try to identify cases or situations in the past which look similar to what we've seen now. And when we find them situations in the past, we'll gather up all of the knowledge around them. So there might be comments from people, there might be work events, there might be feedback on cases. And we'll gather all of that knowledge together. And then from that, we'll try to determine what the root causes of that problem might be. And obviously, the history is a good guide to what the issue may be. And now with Knowledge Builder, we're supplementing that with the explicit documentation. So as well as looking at that history, we'll bring in information from the manuals, from the procedures, to try to identify, the manual might say if you're suffering this situation, then this is what it might be and how to solve it. And we can obviously bring that into the case. Likewise with the procedures, if we see an incident that has a procedure associated with it, we can obviously bring information about that procedure into the case as well. So I think it's incredibly powerful, and as I'm sure most of the listeners know, AI can make mistakes, right? And hallucination are a thing. So what we've tried to do is to be very try to build trust in the system, I suppose. And so when we are referencing historic events, we'll provide links to them events so that the user can just click them, see that historic event in the application, make sure that actually, what the AI is deducing from that past event makes sense and it matches what you're seeing now. And likewise with the documents, we're providing references not only to the document, to the specific page in that document, because like I say, these things are hundreds of pages in some instances. So users can click on that, see the page in the application, make sure the summary is correct, and it's pulling out the right information. So we're trying to make sure that customers can trust the AI and take meaningful action off of what we're raising in the application.
Yeah, so I guess it's one thing seeing guidance on what to do next, but sometime if there's the time or not, that it's good to have that option to be able to dive into the original source of it and dig in further to the issue. I mean, because they might be asked questions. Other colleagues might say, how does that relate to that? What's the detail behind that? And that's that next step. And obviously, of course, the interactive element where you can ask questions is a key part of that as well, where you can get those answers as well. If in the summary it doesn't tell the complete picture in some cases.
It's a very good point. So the Copilot is available there, and you can open that up and you can ask onward questions. So if you've got if you want clarification on certain topics, or if you want to have more general advice, it can provide that. But exactly that. So that that interactive session is there if you need it, and then you can also dig into the details of past events or the documentation to help guide the onward actions. And
I guess another question as well, because we the day we're recording this, we've done sort of quite a big announcement actually on sort of new capabilities in the app where. Usually we focus on sort of time series data, in order to use this knowledge functionality, but we're sort of taking a slightly different approach, or we've got a new approach to that. So maybe you could sort of elaborate on where we're heading in that direction.
Yes, that's right. So in the past we have focused on predictive maintenance, and that's been reliant somewhat on their measurements and time series data. But we appreciate that actually this knowledge problem, it's a hard problem and people are looking for solutions. So we're keen to have that Senseye support that need without requiring people to get data, to get time series into the cloud and all that connectivity problem. So we're working on allowing users to use Senseye just for the knowledge part of this equation. So roughly how that works is a user would start using Senseye. They'll define the sort of the rough asset types they're working with. So they've got robots or conveyor belts or whatever. And then for each one of them, they'd upload the documentation they have available. In an ideal world, maybe they'd also upload their maintenance records to give a bit more context. And then you'll have the Copilot there to be able to talk to. So if you're in a certain situation, you're doing a certain type of maintenance, you're able to ask the Copilot to pull out the information which is relevant. So it's really addressing that accessibility issue. So going forward, time series won't be a requirement. But as I've described, I think there is huge benefit to centralizing knowledge into a system like Senseye, because you're combining that explicit and the sort of more history information of these assets, and you'll get much better results from that. But it can be very much a progression. You can start with the knowledge side, then if you're seeing benefit, then you can start adding in time series, unlocking the predictive maintenance side of things, and the greater context for the knowledge features.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I mean, being involved in the press release, and if you've anyone out there who might have read the press release will see these things about pathway to predictive maintenance and things like that. And that's the vision. But really, if you want to start at scale, fantastic. The full Senseye capabilities. But we're actually recognising that there are people or organisations that want to start slightly earlier and build up to that, build up the knowledge, and then add. Because the way I see it actually is sort of you're adding sort of layers of data as you go. And we talked about this different sources of knowledge, and the more you build up, the more you can build towards that predictive maintenance at scale when you're ready to do so. Yeah,
that's right. It's very much layers, right? So as well, if you think about sort of maintenance strategies, the documentation side is very much reactive and planned maintenance, and then you can sort of add data on and get more towards the predictive end of that sort of maintenance strategy journey. So very much a pathway. That's good press release.
Good marketing. Good marketing. Yeah. Marketing terms is my fault. But if I come to the next question, we talked about not having time series data and all this sort of data, but data security is obviously a big concern when we start talking about Gen AI, and immediately alarm bells ring. And we did talk about this and address this on previous. We talked about the maintenance co-pilot launch and stuff. But it might be worth, Dan, if we just sort of talk about that again. How we ensure that sort of security. It's obviously a very important point.
Yeah, it's always been an important point, obviously, for our customers. We're obviously handling a lot of important data. The knowledge is no different to that. So obviously it's encrypted at rest and in transit, and we obviously make sure that it doesn't go anywhere it shouldn't, either to our customers or anywhere else. I think the particular problem, concerns with generative AI is that you take your organization's knowledge, which is obviously incredibly valuable, you upload it into some of these language models, and then your cloud providers or the AI providers take that knowledge, build it into future models, and then it's exposed to the public. Or I suppose the other concern is that you provide the knowledge to Senseye, we build it into models and then expose it to other customers of Senseye. And I can say both of these things don't happen, you'll be pleased to know. So, the information is provided to the language model to answer the questions which are asked of it, and then it's forgotten. So there's no training of the textual information within Senseye. We do work with cloud and AI providers, obviously, but they are not allowed to use that data to train future models. So it doesn't go elsewhere. So it's all safe.
So it's all segregated. And it's learning. So it's your own sort of knowledge. What we're saying is your own knowledge repository, and that's what it's learning from. Only your knowledge, the knowledge you put in there, is what it learns.
That's it. Yeah, very much so. So you can think of it as each customer has their own knowledge repository that is being used by the language model. It doesn't go to other customers or to providers other than to provide the language models they're supposed to be providing. We do have a certain element of knowledge we build into it, which is the sort of a baseline, but obviously that complements the knowledge that customers provide.
Absolutely. I'm sure I'll be asking you that question again.
Yes.
As we continue to iterate on the co-pilot functionality.
It's an important point, and obviously there's and rightly so, there's lots of concerns around it. So it's a good thing to iterate on. Yeah.
We'll continue to do that. We might do an episode on it.
Yeah. That might be a bit dry.
Maybe. But I guess, of course, we want to look at the future. This is fantastic development. If we take a step back and look, you and your team or teams of working on this and where we've come from in a year, it's just flown by, and there's so much more to come. But I guess in terms of that knowledge sharing element, what do you see where that's sort of going to shift in the next few years?
Yeah, it's always dangerous making predictions nowadays, especially.
Don't hold us to it.
But I think it's very much, there's some threads in this conversation which I think is the key bits, right? Accessibility keeps coming up, and I think that's how you solve this knowledge problem. Is one thing capturing it, but you need to unlock the value of it, which means accessing it when you need it. So I can see very much that developing, and in the ideal world, you'd be on the maintainers would be on the shop floor. They might want their hands free. So you could imagine it, this knowledge coming to the shop floor, and I suppose it's going back to this, co-pilot or wingman concept. You literally want an AI there beside you, providing the knowledge as you need it, right? So you could imagine much more natural language interfaces and the like coming. The other topic we touched on is around sort of the lack of skills within the workforce, and there, we're solving that to a certain extent, because when we see an issue, we're obviously providing that prognostic guidance, prognostic guidance on it. But ideally, you'd probably want to be providing that knowledge and training before them situations happen. So you could imagine that actually you take all of the knowledge which Senseye has and producing sort of documentation. So you could actually produce procedures based on what we've seen in the past, or training programs. And you start, Siemens has lots of VR training and the like. So you could start seeing these things combined. I should note that these aren't on the short term or medium time roadmap, but you can see this sort of the directions of this as it progresses.
But we've seen, because a lot of this stuff has been very fast moving. So even like the steps we've made in the past year. So although we're not explicitly promising these things, it's not, like I said, it's not beyond the realms of possibility.
No, I think this is where you'll see things. And obviously, the AI is just getting smarter and smarter, so you're bringing more and more data. Some of our customers actually sort of record videos of experienced maintainers working on machines. And it'd be great if you could actually sort of take that information and understand it and then surface it when these situations occur. And you can imagine, situations like that. You just extend the knowledge which is captured and, the ability to surface it just when it's needed going forward.
I think that actually to pick out one of those points you made about producing actual manuals based on the inputs from as it's learning and improving its knowledge, the system and just being able to produce it's almost like new manuals for people to use. I think that's just so powerful. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, and it really helps because when you're, like I say, there's not much, they're struggling with this sort of skills gap in the market. And one of the issues here is that obviously when newcomers come into an organisation, they typically go through a period of training and mentorship, right? And the people delivering that mentorship are the experienced people who are leaving through retirement. So actually you don't have that sort of mentor network and support as you did in the past. And that learning curve is so much steeper for these individuals. And for the organisation, obviously it's going to cost more time and resources getting them to the point where they're productive. So if you could proactively provide, that knowledge and the training based on, information with knowledge within sort of knowledge products like Senseye, it could be very beneficial to that upskilling of individuals.
And I guess actually, because I was just looking at sort of the final question I was going to ask you, in a way that what you were saying just then has answered that question. But if we're going to narrow it down to sort of one piece of advice for maintenance teams, we know you described very brilliantly at the beginning about the struggles about knowledge loss and being able to collaborate with colleagues from this side of the world to this side of the world. But even in plants, sometimes there's barriers there. But what's one piece of advice you'd sort of leave the audience with, on that topic?
Yeah, so I think capturing knowledge is difficult, right? And we've touched on that, but I think the hardest thing is just to get started. So I would just start capturing it, and obviously as you go along, you iterate and you improve it, and you get value from it. But I think often when you look at sort of data-related problems, people have lots of data most of the time. They just don't get value from it, and it's very much like we talk about time series in the past, and that actually. Many organisations we work with, they don't have particular sensors set up potentially, but they still have a load of time series data, and we've been able to unlock the value in that data by pulling information from control systems and PLCs and providing predictive maintenance on top. And I think it's very similar to this knowledge topic. Although organisations, listeners might be thinking, actually, I don't have much knowledge. A lot of the time it's just that knowledge is fragmented, it's not centralized, it's not available, and you're not getting value from it. So, applications like Senseye, being able to centralize that and surface that knowledge when you need it, may unlock a lot of value in information that you already have, you're just not benefiting from. So that's what my closing statement.
It's essentially, it's like and we've talked about this again with time series data. It's like don't underestimate the data you have, because I guess sometimes you have customers who underestimate and maybe sometimes overestimate, but don't just think, I don't have anything to share, because we've talked about all these different areas you can bring in knowledge. You'll have useful stuff that you can get you started on this journey.
Yeah, almost certainly. And I would imagine most manufacturers will have, everyone will have manuals of their assets. Yeah. Most will have standard operating procedures. Many will have maintenance systems, and that in itself is loads of information that could be put to good use. And there's also this really lovely feedback loop that when you start making use of the knowledge, people see the benefit in it, right? So when there's alert raised in Senseye and it tells them, actually, this is what we think the root cause would be, they see the value in what they've provided in the past. And guess what? They're motivated to provide more knowledge in future. And you get into this nice loop where people see the value in providing knowledge. It's not just a document they create that no one looks at. It gets surfaced again, and it helps people in future. So if you can get into that routine and that cadence, good from there on.
Yeah. And that's your closing statement.
That's my closing statement.
That's your closing statement. No, absolutely. And so I think that's a really great way to sort of close out the episode. Again, if you want to find out more, visit the website. We've got lots of information on there about the Copilot specifically, as well as Senseye Predictive Maintenance, the platform. Thank you, Dan, for joining us today once again.
Thank you for having me.
Come back for a fourth time.
Yeah, we'll see.
And I'd like to thank the audience out there for listening and watching wherever you are, and see you on the next episode.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels, and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.